Sick. Rightio. Welcome to episode 3 of the After Party podcast powered by AFA. Today I am joined by a special guest and close friend, Brisbane Roar player, Jesse Daley. How are we today, Noodle?
Good, thanks, Con. How are you, mate? Thanks for having me.
Mate, good. We got here all in one piece, which is great. Mate, so you got the dub on Friday, was it?
We did, yep, Friday night, yep.
So how's that game going? That was against MacArthur. So where are those boys at?
MacArthur are from Sydney, so they're a new team this year in the A-League.
Yep.
And yeah, we got our first win in a few weeks. It's been a while, so that was good. The boys are up and about this week at training. And yeah, it was a good win.
Yeah, brilliant. So you guys still have a fair way to go in the season. I think we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. Yep. I was lucky enough to catch your first home game. Well, what I would say is probably the first half of it. So basically, a little story time. Whilst you were getting ready the whole time and probably just focusing on the game, it was complete and utter chaos for me and a few other boys down at Noosa. We teamed up with your mum and little brothers, and she managed to organise a party bus.
A minibus to the game.
I know, bro, from Noosa all the way to Redcliffe, I think it was. Yeah. And we were belligerently drunk and not ready at all to join that Raw crowd. But yeah, it's an interesting crowd, the Raw crowd. It's very different to any other sporting franchise I've seen. They're so loyal, obviously, and they're
really, I'm interested why.
They're nuts for it. I just mean it's just a different demographic. You can imagine me. I'm around big blokey ferals that watch rugby, and then the Raw crowd's a lot more nice. Yeah. And it was safe to say that the crowd wasn't enjoying me at all.
Your behaviour was a bit out of control.
Yeah, we got to half time, and then I'm seeing nothing out of my face at this point because I'm just a billion beers deep. And then just all these dudes surrounding me in suits. That was the weird thing. It wasn't normal security guards. It was suits.
High profile security.
Yeah, they were we're from the Football Federation of Australia or some shit. I'm like, what the fuck? And then out of nowhere, I'm just getting skull dragged out. And I'm like, no. And so I had to watch the rest of the game from outside the stadium, which sucked.
So what did you do? Did you end up waiting for everyone outside?
I waited outside. I tried to barter my way back in, and then I just had to go off the crowd, basically, how the game was going. But with soccer, that's always a hard thing to tell. Yeah. But I ended up getting back in towards the end, but I was met by the suits again, and they were like, get out, you idiot. And I was like, I probably shouldn't ruin this day anymore. It's not about me at all. It's about you.
And what was the bus trip back like to Noosa?
Man, it's like any bus trip. I'm sure you've been on a few, on tours and stuff when you're coming back. It's nowhere, the energy is never the same as on the way.
Yeah, it's different.
And it can be very depressing, especially when you're heading back with, sleeping duff and shit on the bus. It's just not nice. But yeah, as you were saying before, obviously, and this is the best thing about today is that I'm not the most knowledgeable about soccer and everything like that, so I'm more inquisitive than anything. But you guys did start off pretty well. You had a couple of good games rolling through, and then there were a couple of losses and draws and whatnot that you felt before, obviously, the game on Friday. With that there, how discouraging is that in football for you guys if it is a draw, for instance? Obviously points are points for you guys and it's just ladder climbing, but if you do walk away, because I know, for instance, in a rugby game or anything like that, if we draw, it's pretty defeating, but obviously it happens a lot more within football. Is that something that, can you take a lot away from a draw, or?
I think it depends. As you said, we started the season really well, and then we went through a bit of a sticky patch where there was quite a few draws and a few losses. I think with draws, it really depends. Because sometimes you can have the better of the game, right, and have lots of chances, and maybe not put your chances away, and you can feel quite flat about not winning the game. But then on the other hand, you can ride your luck a little bit, and kind of the other team can have a few chances, and then you kind of get away with one, and so you're in the change room after, and you're like, boys, we got away with one there. Yep. So I think I
guess that's so true. You never think about it from the other end. If you're down and get back in, that's so true.
Yeah. So I think to answer your question, it really depends. But I think the frustrating thing for us was that it was consistent over a 7-week block. Whereas if it's a one-off, I think it's a bit easier to swallow.
So, yeah, for sure. But when you got them back to back, I could imagine frustration would set in.
Yeah.
And as well, are there any little rivalries or anything picking up at all this season between any other teams? Is there anyone at all that has that vibe with you guys lately?
I think the teams around us. So we've got Western Sydney this week, which will be a big game. They're just in front of us. Anyone that's kind of in and around us fighting for the same points, really same position on the table. They tend to be the fiery encounters. But like there's 3 teams in Melbourne, 3 teams in Sydney, so they all have these big derbies, and we don't really because we're the only team in Queensland. So I guess Sydney FC is a big game as well because it's a bit of a state of origin. But besides that, no, we don't have a big derby like you'd see in some other cities. Yeah,
for sure. And with you guys now, like, I mean, obviously you're in the States for a bit, but we'll get to that. But coming back to Brisbane and joining the A-League and whatnot, like, what is the standard that you're feeling at the moment? Do you feel as though Australian football has really increased and, like, is at a good standard at the moment?
Yeah, I think a good way to gauge it is by the fans' reactions and kind of what the fans feel because they're the ones that...
Bro, it's packed down at the Roar. Like, it's right? Insane. Like, that first game, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and they're the loyal ones that go week in, week out.
Yeah.
I see stuff on social media. Everything's really positive about the A-League this year. And obviously, the salary cap took a bit of a hit because of COVID.
Yep.
But it's kind of almost been a blessing in disguise, I think, because it's given a lot of younger players opportunity. And, of course, like the fans want to see that. They want to see young, local...
Definitely. And it's good for just the national sport in general if everyone's developing from a younger age.
Exactly. It's good for the national team and will be in 5-10 years' time and stuff like that. So I think it's been a breath of fresh air, the A-League this year.
Yeah, it's awesome because, like, I mean... I think I was talking to Ben Keys about it a little bit, and like, because I'm just inquisitive on every sport, you know what I mean? I like to know where everything's at, and especially with you back in Brizzy now, I'm following it a lot more. But he did mention, somebody threw to me, was that Lyndon Dykes character. I didn't know much about him at all, but it was like, it was interesting for me to see somebody that was, as he explained, and I don't know if this is like 100% factual and whatnot, but seemed as though he was in like a Div 2 sort of situation here in Australia, and now he's killing it in like the championship, I believe it is.
Yeah, I don't know his story incredibly well. Like, I know roughly what happened, but he was playing Gold Coast Local League, which is probably 2nd, 3rd division, depends which way you look at it here in Queensland, and then went over for a trial to Scotland in a Division 2 side, did well, got picked up by another team in Scotland, did well, and then now he's at a big club, QPR, in England. And he'd be on really good coin. So his story is, like, incredibly inspiring, to be honest with you. And it shows, like, kind of if you stick at it and you have the right attitude and chase your dream, then, like, something's going to happen because, his rise is, like, unheard of.
Yeah, well, but it's nice to know at least the pathway is there, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there would have been probably a few salty blokes floating around the A-League hearing that story, being like, oh yeah, great work, Lyndon, you dog. But yeah, so he's like playing for Scotland now, is he not? Or
yeah, he's playing with the national team for Scotland. He's their number 9, which is pretty crazy in itself. Just having a few headset problems here. There we go.
That's all good.
Which is crazy. He's obviously going to go to the European Championships probably in the summer, which is like a big international tournament.
Yep.
Pretty much his rise has just been unbelievable. Like, you can't really explain it. It's not something that's really happened before.
Never happened before, yeah.
Yeah, so to kind of watch it, and he's around a similar age, a few years older than me, so to see that, it was definitely pretty inspiring.
It's nuts. Speaking of Scotland as well, I just thought of that then. Yeah. Have you heard much of old Willie Bainham lately?
Yeah, I speak to William quite often, and obviously he's trying to, like, do something similar.
Follow a similar path.
Yeah, to what Lyndon did.
Definitely.
So, he's playing over there at the moment, I think, in the 4th division, but he's scoring a few goals, and like, if you do well anywhere, people are going to notice you, right? Like, in any sport, I think.
Of course.
Like any walk of life. Like, if you're doing well, then you'll get noticed, and especially in our sport, like, it's a global game, so if you do well in whatever country, there's always going to be someone looking, and you knock on the door enough, someone's going to open the door, aren't they?
Yeah, I was talking to him not long ago, and it sounds like an absolute fucking nightmare over there. Like, he was like, I think it was like a 3-day lockdown here in January, and he's like, everyone's bitching and moaning in Australia. He's like, I've been inside for like 7 months. He's like, I haven't even seen my teammates, like, outside of training, and I'm like, oh, that'd be so bad.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the start, huh? So why soccer to begin with? Obviously, like, I mean, it is very popular, probably more popular back in the day, I'd say, from a younger age. But I mean, I guess without contact and whatnot, it is usually a first choice. But like, what was your first reasoning, I guess, to like flow towards that? Was it just you were good at it, or it was something that you were a fan of to begin with? Or
That's a really interesting question. And I can't probably finger point give you a direct answer, but I think I just had so much energy as a kid. I was probably a little bit angry as well, like a bit on the ADHD side, and probably just kicking a ball, like going nuts, like mum getting me out of the house. I think that's what it was. Like there was no real like big football family or anything like that. I've kind of found my own way in that sense, but yeah, it was more of just getting me out of the house, keeping me active. And then obviously my love for the great games just grew over the years. And yeah, probably gone from strength to strength in terms of understanding of the game, love of the game, stuff like that.
Yeah, so who were you playing for as a junior?
I was at a club called Lions, which the Roar actually came from in the early days of the A-League. And then they kind of broke apart and whatnot. But I was at Brisbane City as well, which is a club at Newmarket. And they've produced quite a few players over the years. And yeah, I had a few clubs in between, but
yeah, and then you moved up and through to Raw Youth, is that right?
Yeah, I went to the QAS first, which is the Queensland Academy of Sport, and I was there for a few years in high school. They had an unbelievable program, and I think that helped me a lot. It taught me just a lot about the little things like professionalism, sacrifice you have to make, stuff like that. And then, went to the Raw.
This episode is brought to you by Bremont. Bremont is an award-winning British luxury watch brand manufacturing mechanical watches in Henley-on-Thames in England. Co-founded by brothers Nick and Giles English in 2002, Bremont has made a substantial impact on the watchmaking industry in a very short period of time by making considerable investment in their UK watchmaking facility to be able to manufacture their own case and movement components in-house. The brand remains to its original principles of aviation and military, British engineering and adventure, as well as manufacturing watches for some of the most exclusive military squadrons around the world. Bremont continues to play an influential role in revitalising the British watch industry, the birthplace of numerous timekeeping innovations still used today. Bremont produce durable watches that look good in the boardroom and can survive the deepest oceans and the coldest of highest mountains, hence the tagline, tested beyond endurance. The brand is now in the top handful of chronometer-rated watch producers in the world. For more information, go to Bremont.com or visit Melbourne Bremont Boutique. Yeah. So then, I mean, there was that point afterwards as well where I think you were in Melbourne for a little bit there.
Yeah.
Was there much of a difference between like the level of competition down there than up here, or?
I'm not sure if there was a difference in level. It was more to do with like the hype around the sport down there.
For sure.
Sport in general.
Sort of what we were just talking about with the AFL and whatnot.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly right. So it was kind of just more of that. Like people cared more, I guess. There was more people at games. The standard itself, actually, there wasn't that much of a difference. But yeah, I'd say the main difference is just the hype around it.
Yeah, definitely. How's old AJ going? Is he still down there?
Age is going strong. He's playing for a club called Heidelberg, which is traditionally a big club, like Greek background. But the big fella's going well.
That's good to hear. God, he's an interesting fella.
Very interesting fella.
Very funny.
Great guy, though. Great guy.
Big football player as well, isn't like bigger than most blokes I've seen.
Yeah, he could. I reckon he'd do well in the AFL.
Yeah, I reckon he probably could as well. He's got the boot on him.
Yeah, he can kick. He's got the size about him. So
yeah. So then from Melbourne, obviously, you went through to Seattle there, and for the Sounders originally then. So when you were contacted by them, I believe there was it was Hutch that was in Seattle.
Yeah, it was an Aussie coach. His name's Hutch.
And he used to play in the A-League as well. Yeah.
Yeah, he's played for Central Coast Mariners, which is a team in New South Wales for 10, 11, 12 years maybe. He's club legend there. Was captain, won championships and premierships and whatnot. So yeah.
And what was that first contact like from between you and him? Obviously, I'm sure there would have been a bit of background deals and whatnot going on with whatever management you got. But I mean, was that finally a refreshing thing to hear? like some sort of opportunity come through?
Yeah, mate. To be honest, it was so random, like how it came about. And I was kind of at a really weird in-between phase because I've kind of just fallen out of the system. I went back into the state league.
Yep.
And it was kind of like, what am I going to do here? Like, have I got to kind of go down a different path, or is something going to open up for me? And then I actually went over initially for a 2-week trial. He said to me, come over for a 2-week trial, see how you do pretty much. And he loves to tell me the story. Like, he'd heard a few things about me and he wasn't sure on taking me over even for a trial. So, yeah, and then I went over to Seattle, 2-week trial, did all right. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, he pulled me into a room and there was me and another Aussie there trialing. And he kind of said, at the start of the 2 weeks, he's like, only one of you are getting a contract. And then so he's taken us into a room separately, and the other Aussie, Berkey, went in first, and he said to Berkey, oh, you got a contract, I think.
And so you're just going, fuck.
And so he went in first. So I was kind of standing outside thinking, like, what's going on here? Like, this is torture. Yeah. And then it was obviously my turn, and he said to me, one of the first things he said was like, oh, we've signed Berkey, we've given him a contract. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh no, like that's me done. I'm going to be on the first flight home, really. But then he said, nah, like, we decided to sign both of you. And my whole, like, I was just like,
oh, dude, it's horrible. Like,
oh, I was so relieved. And then yeah, we had to come back to Australia, get our visa stuff sorted, and then straight back over.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it would have had to been so much nicer as well, having somebody, I guess, that's already been through, like, not the exact same experience, but just having, like, an ex-footballer from Australia, like, be your coach. Did that help at all? Having somebody just from home, like, to speak to and whatnot? Like, obviously you don't know them that well, but, like...
Yeah, it was massive, seriously, because, like, I know that Americans speak the same language and food's kind of similar and whatever, but... the difference when you actually get there and you're on the ground and you notice like just little things, like off the top of my head I can't think, but there's just so many things going on where I was like, whoa. Like, for example, the first week I was there, I saw some guy with a gun strapped to his leg in the supermarket, and I was like, what's going on here? Like,
and it's just little things like that to them would be nothing.
Nothing,
but to you,
right?
You're like,
yeah.
Getting like,
I'm like checking around, I'm looking around, I was like, is someone going to arrest this guy? Like, if you're in Woolies with a gun, like...
oh, dude, you'd be the SWAT team.
Yeah.
It'd be horrific.
So just little things like that.
Yeah.
Where I can lean on him, ask him things, being like, what's going on here? So, yeah, no, it was a massive help. And, yeah, to be honest, if it wasn't for him, then I obviously wouldn't have been there. But it definitely helped a lot.
Would have been harder to stay, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and that's the thing as well that I was going to talk through with you. Obviously, you were... in America, like, as in such a volatile time. Like, I think you moved in 2018, like, pretty much as everything starts going tits up over the progressing of, like, 2 years. Was that noticeable immediately once you got there, or was it kind of, like, travelling on as the seasons and whatnot carried on? Well, I mean, external shit. This is not just football.
Yeah, no, the first 2 years was brilliant. Like, loved every minute. Obviously had it, sorry. Loved every minute, 2018, 19. Had its challenges, obviously, but yeah, loved it. And then 2020, I obviously came back here for the off-season, went back, and it was just nuts. Like, COVID hit almost straight away in that year, didn't it? March.
Yeah.
Seattle was one of the first heavily affected places. Like, it was the first hotspot in America. And then even then, you kind of didn't realize what was happening. You maybe just think it's a 1-2 week thing. And then... it obviously keeps going and going. It gets pretty serious around the world, obviously. And then there's all the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yep.
And there's riots in the street. So all of a sudden you've gone from like everything being in full lockdown, nothing open, locked in an apartment, to 10 minutes up the road there was cars being set on fire, like proper riots, like stuff I've never seen before. And I like... dragged my mate one day and I said, oh, come on, we got to go for a drive through the city, like see what's going on here.
Yeah. You'd almost have to.
Yeah. And he was like, oh man, like you're crazy. Anyway, I convinced him to get in the car, and like there was just so much damage done to stuff in the city. Windows smashed everywhere, like burnt cars on the street. And it was like a surreal, like you felt like you're in, what's the movie with Will Smith, When the World Ends?
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend, man. I felt like I was in that. No one else was driving on the street. stuff going down everywhere, left, right, and centre.
Oh, I could imagine.
And obviously, I'm on the other side of the world to family and friends and whatever. So you feel.
I'm sure Louise is shitting bricks.
Yeah, Louise is like, get home. Like, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, dude. I guess it was it would have been, especially with the States, it would have been a lot more scary. Even when like COVID first started up, those first like couple of weeks, everyone was like proper worried because it was like, oh, this can kill you. Now it's a bit like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. But like, I mean, in America where everything is just so like unregulated, whereas like here, like everyone, like you've got a lockdown, you're locked down, you know what I mean? You just go and you do it. Whereas like in the US, it looked like everyone was just losing their fucking mind. And then as soon as they had a reason to pop off, they popped off.
Well, that was the weird thing because we'd be in lockdown like for, I think it was like 2 or 3 months, like proper lockdown, like nothing open besides a gas station and like a Walmart or Target or something like that. And then out of nowhere, there's thousands of people in the streets like protesting for Black Lives Matter right in the middle of coronavirus. And you're like, what is going on here? Like, it's just going to spread and like spiral out of control.
Oh, so absolutely nuts. And did that affect at all anything like to do with the football and whatnot? Like, was that getting in the way of trainings and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So we had like a 2-3 month layoff where we were just legitimately locked in our apartment. Yeah. No training. Had to do our own individual programs. We were on Zoom doing like gym sessions every morning, which got very old very quickly, as you can imagine. And then you're running by yourself, and you know what, like a pre-season or an off-season's like when you have to run by yourself. Like
it's the last thing you want to do. You want to be with the boys and getting that shit done.
So like you'd be running by yourself, and it was kind of like there wasn't going to be an end date. It was like we're going back here. Like it was just indefinitely. Yeah. And we were really lucky at our club. Like they never missed a payday or anything like that. But like it was the constant training with not like an end date or like a date when the season was going to
for sure. Because that's what people like don't realise as well is like the game's the reward. Like all the training and shit is the stuff that sucks and all you want to do is play. So when that gets stripped away, it's an absolute fucking nightmare. But as well, let's talk about your career in Seattle as well. I mean, you were playing for Div 2 for the majority of, that's correct. And what that was they're originally like just the Sounders Div 2, but they've got a different name. Tacoma, is it?
So Seattle Sounders is a pretty big MLS club, which is the first division in America. So I originally signed with the second team or with the Seattle Sounders franchise and played games in the second team. And then after the first year I was there was a bit of a change. Tacoma Defiance took over. I think there were some other investors and stuff like that. So they changed names. It's probably the equivalent to a Brisbane first team, and then Gold Coast is the team below, the feeder team, something like that. So that was kind of the situation. But I can't speak highly enough of my time there. I loved every minute, made some pretty incredible friends. Just a good round, like life experience all round. Football,
for sure, and you would have just seen different cultures and whatnot, like, especially at the time, it's pretty nuts, but, like, it's definitely something you'll never forget. With that as well, because, like, I remember watching some documentary, like, not long ago, it would have been a year or two ago, and it was on Atlanta FC. And
Atlanta United,
Atlanta United, and they were just, like, talking about, like, just the sheer growth of that football club, like, in the MLS, and I didn't know much about it, but, like, in my head, I always assumed those sort of crowds and that sort of energy would only really be in Europe and whatnot. But it's good to see that is moving over to the States there as well. But, like, I mean, when I was watching that one in particular, that looked like it was absolute chaos, like so much fun and, like, just crazy support there. Are there clubs that are starting to build up that following and whatnot in America now and starting to really get that, like, a good following as though many other teams do, like in Europe and Australia?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say the main difference between like here and America is just the facilities, infrastructure, the money. Like it's just out of this world, really. And like Seattle's first team, for example, would get 50,000 every single week to the first team games, which is like you don't get that.
That's insane.
You don't get that at some clubs in Europe, really. No. And it is a growing like soccer country, football country, but they've got everything there to make them like a powerhouse in the world in the next 10, 15, however many years. And they have big players. I don't know if you know Zlatan Ibrahimovic, like massive name. He went and played there in LA, and yeah, they're just attracting good players year after year, and they've obviously got the money to sustain it. So yeah, I think the only way is up for America.
Well, as it gets bigger and bigger, I'm sure there are going to be just more and more bigger signings from Europe and stuff that are going to want to go and live in LA or Florida or whatever and do it, because it's sort of happening with rugby as well.
It's not a bad life as well.
Yeah, no, not at all. But that's what they're sort of doing with rugby now as well. The MLR, that's getting bigger and bigger. Heaps of Aussies heading over there. They've got the Los Angeles Guillotines.
They actually, in Seattle, they had a rugby team, Seattle Seawolves.
Oh, really?
Yeah, look them up after this. But they would get a few thousand to a game even. Like, it's just sport-mad country, man.
Yeah,
like,
definitely. And it's those sort of sports that I guess weren't, like, in the past celebrated as much, like your soccers and rugbies and stuff, just because it wasn't that big. They've got their baseball, football, like that's their shit. But, I mean, once you realise the athletes that are there, and then also the amount that don't actually make those leagues that are in there, like, so for instance, like your football players or baseball players and whatnot, there's going to be more and more people that are like really, really high athletes that are going to have to trickle down into other stuff. And I feel like MLS, MLR and stuff are going to scoop up a lot of those sort of players, definitely. But there's blokes now that are living in LA playing for the LA Guillotines, and it looks so much fun. They're playing in this thing called the Coliseum, and it's this huge like college stadium, and it's shaped like a Coliseum, and it just looks.
They get decent crowds, or they're not allowed any at the moment?
I don't think they're really allowed much at the moment, but as soon as they do, I can't see why not. Like in America, it's one of the biggest sevens circuits as well. So as you said, it's only gonna grow there. This episode was brought to you by The Lad Collective. Eddie and Bill Overton, good friends of mine, also know Jesse very well as well. They've started their own business making sheets for blokes. I'm sure you've seen these before, haven't you?
Yeah, plenty.
Yeah, mate, and they're built for blokes like us. Absolute grubs who have no idea what they're doing in the bedroom. But yeah, if you don't know how to make your bed, these guys make it easy. They got top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right tags on there. They've now got a new line of towels and also laundry detergents as well. The right stuff that you're meant to use for your sheets there. So if you want to get your sheet together, make sure you go to The Lad Collective on Instagram or www.theladcollective.com.au.
Great sheets.
And mate, so then when you were to head back, so you finished up your time with Seattle there, and you head back in about August last year, was it?
Yeah, about August. Yeah.
I remember there was talks when you were coming back, and there was like a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen now? Yeah. Just because obviously there's so many different opportunities everywhere. He's going to come back to Australia, look elsewhere, do something else in the States. But then I remember talking to you, and you were like, man, I'm coming back to Brisbane. And that had to be under the hush for a little bit, had to keep lips sealed. Yeah. But I was so hyped, mainly because I just remember you boys back in the day, you, Keezy and all them, Bainham, yada yada, all just loving the Roar and whatnot. And how special was that for you to come back and play for them?
Yeah, it was crazy, really. And I still have to pinch myself because it is a surreal thing. Obviously, when you grow up and go to your team's games and watch them for so many years, and even if you're doing well as a kid and even if you're doing well growing up, like, you know what it's like, the step from like junior football or to the youth team to actually playing in the first team, like it's a pretty big jump, and it's a pretty like rare thing to do, and you always kind of like, you have that dream, but you're like, will it ever actually happen? Yeah, of course. And a lot of things, you have to get lucky along the way, and a lot of things have to go in your favour.
Reality catches up to you in your 20s as well. Like, it can just all be a big dream and whatnot, but then once the reality of it is, it's fucking hard to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of, I was in America, and I kind of had not given up on the dream of playing for my hometown club, but I didn't think about it as much. I used to be obsessed with it and just think about it all the time. And I kind of just let go a little bit. And then, I got this call one day when I was in America and saying, like, they've got a contract for me. And I would have stayed in America happily. I still had 18 months left of my contract there. But I could never say no to coming back to Brisbane and fulfilling that dream. So, no, it's been mad, it's been crazy, and now I'm just trying to make the most of my opportunity. And kind of, I know I'm in a privileged position being a local boy playing in the team here, so just trying to make the most of it, really.
And I mean, you've had a pretty good experience with coaches, like all in all, and I believe it's Warren Moon, your coach now.
Yep.
And he was your high school coach, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. He was my coach at Churchy for the 3 years that I was there. And so, yeah, I had a previous relationship with him through that.
Yeah, and so was that contact sort of happening whilst you were in America and whatnot, or was it kind of out of the blue?
Yeah, it was kind of out of the blue, to be honest with you. And then obviously...
Sure, you had an eye on you, though, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we have a football director as well, obviously, at the club that probably makes those decisions. So, yeah, it was more out of the blue and, yeah, kind of just a thing that you never really expect. And when you get told, like, it's happening, like, you ask, are you sure this isn't, like, someone's not taking the piss out of me? But, yeah, no, it's pretty surreal.
Yeah, because, as I was saying before, I just remember you guys going absolutely nuts for it. I went to a couple. I've actually only been to 3 Roar games now, well, 2.5. But the half being your opening. But I remember I went because Keezy dragged me to some of the old grand finals.
Yeah,
and like fuck, that's when I was like,
I'm sure you were glad he did that.
Oh, bro, I've never I owe him for that. Because you know me, man. Like I've always been like head in the mud, dumb footy player, just going like, oh no, fuck soccer, go and shit. But like,
I think you've come around over the years, though.
I have, because I've just fallen in love with sport as a whole.
Yeah.
But those games changed everything for me completely. Because I mean, I think it was that one that sticks in my brain very much so against Western Sydney.
Yeah.
And the one
Barisha header. That's our Barisha header.
Oh, bro, that game was insane.
Yeah.
I think it was tied up like towards the very end. And then, what was that little fella, little bald dude?
Oh, Enrique.
Enrique,
dude.
And everyone was going nuts for him, bro. I remember that was crazy. And I remember I was going to that game and Keezy was just like, oh, yeah. Just wear, like, you got Queensland stuff, just wear Queensland stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. And so I'm, like, walking through and, like, trying to find him, like, at the gate and whatnot. And I'm wearing this, like, Reds jacket.
Yeah.
So I was, like, red. You know, like, I didn't know what colour.
The other team was red.
The other team was red. And I'm walking through and then I get around the corner and then I just see this big pack of people. I'm like, what the fuck? And then I just see this, United. I'm stuck, like, in this thing. Blokes, like, grab me, like, you're with us now, mate. I'm like, I don't want to be with you at all. You look terrifying. Dirty Western Sydney ferals. But were there, I mean, now, I guess, the team would be relatively young and a lot of new fellas, like, in the current team now. I guess, are there any of those players left over from when you were a fan and, like, watching it that you have got to play with and stuff now, like even in America or here? Like, is there? Yeah,
there's a few from those grand final winning teams. Jack Hingett is our right back, still there. He was there through all the glory days when they were winning championships. He was the right back. Corey Brown as well, left back. He was there. He was a lot younger. I think he was 18, 19 when they were winning championships. But yeah, they're still there, and there's past players that are always around the club as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like rivals and stuff. Like I always talk about it with Ben especially, and like because I always love to like pick people's brains about like what it's like once you get out there and like start going up against some people who are like legit. They're like they're scary people. Maybe not soccer wise.
I still can't
be that scary, but I mean, as in, they like. Do you ever have those surreal moments anymore when you are going up against opposition or current players now, like those two you mentioned? Like, it's got to be exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I play on the weekend. I actually played against my favourite player growing up, Mark Milligan, at MacArthur. But I think once you step over the white line and onto the field, you kind of just get in the zone, and it's kind of like, what's my responsibility here? You follow the process and structures of the team, and you're more focused on that. I think you just kind of narrow down. You're not really looking around being like, whoa, that's whoever.
Yeah.
I think and then kind of, maybe when you sit back and watch a game after, you're like, well, I just turned whoever or played a pass past him or something like that. But I think in the moment, it's, pretty hard.
You're not worrying about it during the game by any means, but I guess it's a nice thing to reflect on afterwards and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure.
And it seems like there's a few internationals as well now in your team. Who's that Asian fella? What's his name?
Riku Danzaki.
So he was Japanese, I believe.
Japanese, yep. And then we got another one, Masato Kudo from Japan as well.
Yep.
Then we got Jay O'Shea from Ireland, Macaulay Gillespie from England, and Tom Aldred from from England as well.
So it's a big mixed bag of lollies there.
Yeah.
Is Japan starting to creep up a little bit more?
Yeah, Japan's a really interesting one. I think 10 years ago they came up with this 50-year plan to win the World Cup.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. I
Yeah,
think.
no, that's
50-year
sick,
plan. Like who
50, yeah.
who plans 50 years?
Intelligent, dude. Yeah.
So
The Japanese do.
yeah. So I guess like it's a, as you said, pretty diligent plan, and you don't really make a 50-year plan without it being very specific and kind of realistic. So
Yep.
I think they're just getting better and better, and even Asian Cups, they're always massively competitive. They're good in rugby as well, aren't they? Japan?
Mate, they're creeping up as well.
Really,
They're getting very good. And the thing is as well, I'm not sure what it is with football, but especially with rugby, if you're playing internationally for, like, let's say you're playing in Seattle for 3 years, you can then play for the country.
Really?
So right now, like, there's about 6 or 7 Aussie dudes I know just got named in the Japanese
You're kidding.
Touring squad.
See, I don't know how I feel about that though.
I don't either. Like, I mean, there's obviously elements to it that are good. I mean, it opens it up for a lot of those players that maybe didn't make it at an Australian level or whatnot. And like you see that a lot in teams like Italy and Japan and whatnot where they creep through. It's good for the sport in that country as well. So like you should have seen like the last World Cup with Japan when they beat South Africa. Like everyone was melting, dude. Like it was the most insane thing anyone's ever seen, bro. And that skyrocketed Japan rugby completely.
I guess it's not too similar from like Lyndon Dykes, who grew up in Australia but then ended up playing for Scotland. I guess that country kind of takes them in and then they give them their chance to like play for our national team.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, there's good things to it, but I also do understand as well. Like, I mean, sometimes you look at the Japanese rugby team and it does look like the All Blacks or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it is, though. Like half the players are...
It's kind of BS, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's also nuts to watch the Japanese crowds lose their minds because they've finally got a sick team.
Yeah.
But yeah, mate, I guess that's all I've really got for you there. And hopefully you kill it this season. You end up being one of those players that stays a long while for the club.
Yep. No, that's the goal. That's the dream. So we'll just take it day by day, and hopefully.
Brilliant, mate. So when's the next game?
This Friday night in Sydney against Western Sydney.
Hectic. Right, we'll get rid of those bastards for me, and I'll remember not to wear red this time.
Yeah, we'll do.
Raz,
thanks for having me, bro.
Cheers, man. Ripper.